that you haven't had a video in over a month and a half. I've been very busy. I've been to Israel twice. I've had a lot of catch-up work to do with the work that I do. I basically don't get paid for any of this work, and I work just like the rest of you. This is what I do with my spare time, because this is what the Lord has anointed me to do. Nonetheless, I apologize that you haven't received a video. Here's another one. We should be back to the weekly schedule here soon. Tell your friends and family. In this video, we're going to learn about a conversation that Judas had with the priests and the Pharisees, and how in this conversation there is a great deal to be said about God's grace and about man's wickedness and the way that God handles that wickedness. Look forward to what you're about to learn, and thank you for learning with us today. Judas's short conversation with the Pharisees leads us to two main lessons that I'll be teaching today, and that are available to you if you take the time to watch this video. Those two teachings are as follows. The first one is why we don't have a temple today, and the second one is a reflection of God's grace, the character of His power. Let's start with the temple, because it's not nearly as awesome as God's grace, which is His power. Oftentimes people think that we don't have a temple today because the temple was an evil place, or that God made mistakes when He put out His law to His people, or that maybe it is something that we don't need today but they did need back then. This conversation is a gem. It's a shining example of why we don't have the temple. The reason that we don't have the temple is not because the temple was evil, but because the men in it were evil. Both the rulers and the people who were attending the temple services. In fact, the authorities that we have today and back then, they are simply operating within the confines of the mirror that the beating heart of society stands before. They can only do as much good or evil as society allows. Anytime that we point the finger at our rulers, we have three fingers pointing right back at us. The old adage, be the change that you wish to see in the world, couldn't be more true. In this case, the Pharisees said, you see to it. What does this have to do with us? That was their response when Judas said, I've betrayed innocent blood. You see, the Torah says that if you have given false testimony, that witnesses need to bring you forth, and they need to witness of your false testimony, and then the authorities, not the witnesses, but the authorities, mete out the judgment, and the judgment is eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Eye for eye, tooth for tooth isn't in every circumstance. It's just in the circumstance of when we find a person who has given false testimony, what should happen to the innocent party, what the person wants to happen to the innocent party, is what happens to the person who bears the false testimony. And it is the ruler's job to do that. That's why they are the rulers, to handle situations like that. And when Judas came saying, I have betrayed innocent blood, which is the same as saying I have bore false witness, they said, what does this have to do with us? Well, if they're not going to take their responsibility seriously, then they won't have a temple anymore. And here we are today. Those rulers paved a pathway for us for dozens upon dozens of generations to lack an essential part of community worship of God and community with one another, the temple, where we learn how to sacrifice rightly for God and rightly for one another, because the cradle of any relationship is sacrifice. And we don't know how to sacrifice perfectly because we don't have the tool that teaches us how to do so. Secondly, we see God's awesome and abundant grace displayed in how Judas saw to it. I've betrayed innocent blood. What does this have to do with us? You see to it. Well, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, burn for burn, huh? Yeshua was hung on a tree. Judas went and hung himself on a tree. Wow. That is amazing. Our Father is incredible. Now, I do want to point something out here, some splitting of hairs. I'm certain, because I know God's character, that God had presented Judas with the right hand of salvation in this event, inviting him to turn from his wicked ways, even in the betrayal of Yeshua, unto his death, to turn from his wicked ways and to turn to God. But he didn't. Judas continued to choose to put man's authority over himself instead of God's. God would have been merciful to him. God would have trained him up in the ways of the Lord even after Yeshua had passed, and Judas would have found salvation if he was diligent to strive in that. Instead of putting himself under God's good judgment and love, the kind of judgment that changes a man from the inside, lets the old man, the wicked man, the weak man die, so that the new man can live. Instead, he chose to put man's authority over him. And instead of that good judgment, he received man's vengeance. Thank you for growing with us today.
Shalom, my friend, and thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, maybe click one of the videos that are popping up on the screen. And if you think that one of your friends would benefit from this video the same as you have, consider copying the link and sending it to them as a text message. I'm sure they will be blessed by it, just as you have. Shalom, me homies.